It has been 4 years. No, I mean, apparently, it's been 4 years since the time that Shyvana won the VGU poll. And finally, she is here. By which I mean, she is not on PBE yet, but she did at least get her own cinematic. But honestly, this is the way. Putting a new champion or an updated champion on PBE before they get any kind of a teaser kinda ruins it. You wanna do a proper reveal before you give the champion to people to try them out. And for Shyvana, it is working well, because the initial feedback seems really positive. As well as it also includes a lot of jokes about Jarvan, but we'll get to all of that. For now, just know that this cinematic was not made by Fortiche. It was made by the same studio that did some of the other cinematics for Skinlines and other stuff before, which did also include the infamous Vladimir cinematic for Wild Rift. We still don't know what happened with the sound effects there, but this one is so much better. And so, without further ado, let's have a look at the new cinematic that teases Shyvana called Forged in Fury. So, this cinematic is very interesting because it is very difficult to guess what's really happening. And that because we are always debating about two different options. Either this is continuing the previous battle with the Elder Dragon that we saw in the Salvation cinematic, which could be one of the many dragon attacks that happened on Demacia, which we now know about because of the minigame, but it is more likely that this is not the case. It is far more likely that here we are at Renwall, because as you can see, we are in the mountains. And if this is indeed Renwall, then that means that this dragon is Yiva, Shyvana's mother. Which begs the question, was the dragon in the previous cinematic Shyvana's mother too? I honestly thought it wasn't, because Quinn was never mentioned in Shyvana's story before. Not to mention that the vast majority of Quinn's stories happen in the north, this is happening in the south. So everything was simply pointing at that dragon being the Elder Dragon, or any other kind of a dragon. Well now, assuming that these two dragons are the same, it would mean that the previous dragon would also be Shyvana's mother. Which would have to mean that that part of the cinematic happened before Shyvana and Jarvan got together and before they killed her mother. And what makes all of this even more confusing is that, in theory, this cinematic can be happening at Renwall during the time Jarvan and Shyvana are killing Yiva, but it can also be happening at Renwall in the future with a totally different dragon. And as you'll see, this cinematic is trying to clear all of it out, but it's still missing some pieces. Though just remember that the main point of this cinematic is to show us the new Shyvana, and it does do that. Anyway, it all begins with the dragon attacking what we assume is Renwall, after which Shyvana speaks her first line.
Fury. The only thing you gave me, Mother.
Now this is exactly something that is trying to help. You see, it is directly teasing the fact that this dragon is her mother. But we know how previous stories worked before, and so it's also possible that this line is simply referring to the fact that in the past, her mother gave her fury, so it doesn't really clear out who this dragon is. After which Shyvana packs up her things and she leaves the room to fight the dragon. And on her way she notices this. Now finally a mystery solved! This is the sigil that we saw on the Demacian Summoner's Rift from the very beginning. It was always there, right next to Cythria's sword, which is why many people thought that this would be teasing Cythria. But alas, the Cythria dream is dead, and now we know that this is the Light Shield Dynasty sigil. In other words, it belonged to Jarvan. Huzzah, at least we learned something. Now, obviously, because Shyvana has this sigil, it means this has to be happening after Shyvana and Jarvan got together. Which at first would suggest that this is happening after they fought Yiva, which means this would be a different dragon. I mean, since this is teasing that she got this in the past, then the present fight would have to be something in the future. It's basic timeline. And to support this, right after this, we even get a flashback where we can see the scene where she got the sigil. Here we can see Shyvana dragging Jarvan to a Demacian city. Of course, this has to be Renwall because Jarvan is injured and he got injured in their fights with Noxus. After which, according to Shyvana's lore, she got him to Renwall. We then see a scene where the Demacians are afraid of a magical being. That is totally normal, and so Jarvan pushes them away because Shyvana just saved his life. And knowing that since she is a magical dragon, Shyvana wouldn't be safe anywhere in Demacia, he gave her his own light shield sigil. This kinda acts like a royal seal. As long as she has it, no one can touch her. The issue is that this cinematic doesn't really tell us how far in the past this happened. If you look at the framing, it looks like this happened months ago, if not years ago. But technically, it is possible that this flashback from the past happened only a few days ago, because they both had to get to Renwall, after which they had to wait for Yiva to get there so that the fight could start. But again, it is possible that this also happened in the past, and so the present fight is happening in the future, and so what kind of a dragon it is, we still don't know. Anyway, Shyvana then gets determined, and she starts turning into a dragon. And that's where she starts putting on her draconic face. Honestly, I will have to say, the scaly face looks amazing. And I kinda wish this is the face Riot gave her in the game. But shortly after that, she steps outside in her draconic form. And, to the surprise of many, the soldiers of Renwall are not red. Even though that's what the Dragon Guard of Renwall always looked like. Well, this situation kinda makes sense. As far as we know, the Dragon Guard was formed after the battle with Yiva. And so, the Demacian soldiers kinda looking Demacian actually makes sense. But if it is not the Dragon Guard yet, then that would once again suggest that that is Yiva. But if that is Yiva, then why are the soldiers smiling? This would be the first time they would be fighting alongside a magical dragon. Don't tell me they would be excited and not terrified. Which once again doesn't make the situation any less confusing. But at least then we get our first and only fighting sequence that takes exactly 14 seconds. Here, Shyvana changes into her dragon form, they fight for a brief moment, and Jarvan starts supporting Shyvana with ballistas, once again suggesting that we are at Renwall. What's funny is that here you can see the ballistas fire, but then you don't see the bolts in the air. This discontinuity is kinda awkward. But thankfully, in the next scene, it is hard to see, but you can actually see the bolts in the neck of the other dragon. So the ballistas did fire. It is more likely that they wanted to hide the scene, because in that scenario it wouldn't really make sense. Jarvan is firing anti-dragon bolts at two dragons that are intertwined in a fight, while he is only trying to hit one of them. I don't know what you're trying, Jarvan, but that is not a safe strategy. And so the dragons fight for a bit and then they plummet down. After which, Shyvana says this.
Your fire ends in ash.
And this pretty much confirms that this was supposed to be Yiva, Shyvana's mother, the entire time. And if that is the case, what was the battle before? And in that cinematic specifically, how did she become best buddies with Quinn before Jarvan? It seems like there is a bit of a gap in Shyvana's story now. So while we don't really know what's happening there, we do know that Shyvana will need a bit of a bio update. Thankfully, none of these holes are hard to fill, we just need more context. Anyway, the dragon is then defeated and Shyvana rises victorious, which is where we can see her full design. And here, gleaming in the light, you can actually see Jarvan's sigil on her chest, which was the point of this entire cinematic. It was supposed to show us Shyvana's design after all. It wasn't really supposed to progress any kind of a story, which is why all the lore around this might be confusing. But again, thankfully, assuming that this cinematic was about Shyvana and Jarvan killing Yiva, then most things fall into place. But we still should get something that explains the overall story, hence why a bio update would be really good. At the very least, we need something explaining the Quinn there. Because it's not like the two champions just met and they became buddies. It feels like there is a missing storyline about earning Quinn's trust. But then, if you link all of this together and you start assuming that if this was Yiva, then the other dragon was also Yiva, then in the cinematic, Yiva started running away while she was supposed to be fighting Shyvana to the death. I mean, that's literally what her fury was about. After which, in the cinematic, Shyvana starts chasing her, but in the story, she was the one running away. I mean, she has to run away because she has to find Jarvan, but then Yiva needs to turn around and start chasing her because that's how she gets to Renwall. So do you understand why this is so confusing now? All of this can only really make sense if those two dragons are separate. I know they both are pale and blue and they both look like the Elder Dragon, but as long as they are separate, it's fine. The story makes sense that way. But if we get a story where these two dragons get linked, then we're in trouble, because the story continuity would be kinda all over the place. Not to mention, the sigil on Shyvana's chest has a different design in the cinematic, and that makes me mad.